Welcome to the overview video of the Jim Promega Series digital stage pianos. The purpose of this video is to allow you to become familiar with the front panel controls and the features of the Promega Series instruments. Before we begin, I would like to invite you to also view the Drake Technology video detailing the physical modeling capabilities of the Drake microprocessor designed by General Music. By the way, the Promega 3 that I'm sitting at has 5 Drake microprocessors. The Promega 2 model has 3 Drake microprocessors. As I go through the demo, I'll point out the differences between the two models. Also, there are sound clips on the website so you can get a feel for all of the different sounds that the Promega series has to offer. There are sound lists that you can click on and so you can view the sounds within the Promega 3 and the Promega 2 as well. So let's begin by looking across the front panel. First, at the very left, we have a pitch bend and a mod wheel, traditional wheels. They can be assigned to any of the sounds within the instrument as well as out to external MIDI instruments. And then to the right of that is the master volume control. Pretty simple there. To the right of that is an input level control. Besides the stereo outputs, which are line level balanced or unbalanced depending on the cable you use, there are also stereo inputs. So if you have another keyboard that you want to run through the audio of this instrument, if you only have, say, one amplifier that has just one input on it or 2 inputs for stereo, whatever, you can save mixer channels by using the input on the Promega 3 or the Promega 2. To the right of that are the edit and control section. This is where you set up MIDI channels for the various sections, where you can make some adjustments with sounds or the scale that the instrument's going to use and so forth. To the right of that is the effects processor. There are 2 stereo effects processors, one dedicated to reverb effects and the other dedicated to modulated type effects like chorus, flanging. There's delays, exciters, compressors, and so forth there. And then the controls for the effects processors to the right of them with an LED to indicate what parameter you're editing, what the value is. And then to the right of those controls is a level control, which is used to edit the effects processor. Now, to the right of that stuff are 4 sound sections. Each sound section is exactly the same. The pianos, vintage keys, orchestra, pad, bass, and other section all have exactly the same control, so it's quite easy to use, quite easy to get around on. Once you know one section, you know them all. The only difference is the 15 choices of sounds within each section. So let's look at one sound section. To start with, there's a level control, a volume control. So as I raise and lower that, we'll raise and lower the sound within that section. Pretty simple. And I should also point out that they're motorized faders, so as you move around, you'll see the faders jumping to the assigned positions. Makes it much nicer if you're going to try to swell a string sound in or whatever. The fader is starting at the memorized location, so you don't get that jump when you move the fader. It's not going to jump to the new value. It will be very smooth. So that's the level control. And then to the left of that is a 3-digit LED, which in normal circumstances is reading out the level of that instrument, okay, or of that sound section. Also, when you get into various editing functions, the fader, the level fader, and this LED will display other information. To the left of that is the actual sound section. There's a rotary dial, it's continuous dial. As you dial, there's an LED that follows you around, pointing to the specific sound that you're going to select. As I said, there's 15 sounds in each section, so we'll just leave it there on stereo grand, which is what I was playing to start with. There's also some strings in there, so let's go back to just a straight piano like that. All right, below the sound dial is a little button that says to left, T-O left. Very simple. Any sound section that is on, if you want to split the keyboard and send that sound to the left of the keyboard, you press the to left button. Bingo, you have a split. Quite simple. Below that is an on-off button. Each section, if you want to turn a section on, you press the on button. If you want to turn it off, you press the button again and it's off. Very easy. And then to the right, there are effects buttons. And these are on-off buttons. There's a reverb button and a pro effects for the reverb and the chorus and so forth. So it's quite simple. If you want it on, you press it on. If you don't, turn it off. Below those are octave buttons. So as you create splits, if you wanted a string sound on your left hand, but you wanted it in an upper range, well, you can quite easily move the octave up. So that is the sound section. As I said, you can turn any sound section on or off simply by pressing the on-off button. Right now everything is off, so we have no sound. If I wanted to go to vintage keys, simply press the button, it's on, and now I have a Rhodes sound. Okay. Same with orchestra pad. Turn it off and on. If we wanted to layer sound, so let's take a string sound over here and turn on the piano sound. I'm going to take the volume fader on the orchestra section, turn it all the way down for a second, and now we just have piano. If I wanted strings in, I can bring them in at any level I want and mix them right on the fly. There's no menus you have to get in here. Everything is right on the front panel. So if you're like me on gigs, I use setups sometimes, but more times than not, the guys in the band have no idea what they're going to hear from me because I'm constantly fritzing around with stuff and coming up with new ideas. And that's one thing that's so much fun with the Promega. Everything's right there, ready to go. You don't have to push through menus and scroll through things. It's just right there in front of you. So let's create a split real quick. We'll turn on the piano section like that, and let's maybe go over here and grab a bass from the bass section. How about bass ride? Well, if I turn it on, we hear a bass, a ride cymbal, and the piano. If I want the split, press to left, and now we have a split. It's that simple. I'll make note right here that on the Promega 2 there are 3 sound sections, but it's important to realize that the pianos group and the vintage keys group, the groups that feature physical modeling capabilities, those are exactly the same on the Promega 3 and the Promega 2. On the Promega 2, what we've done differently is taken the last 2 sound sections of the Promega 3, the orchestra pad and the bass and other, and combined them to make one sound section with 15 choices. So we've taken the better sounds out of each of these groups and combined them to make one section. So the Promega 2 has 3 sound sections, where this has 4. Both the Promega 2 and the Promega 3 have 88-note weighted hammer action keyboards, but there is a difference between the two. The Promega 3 that I'm sitting at, besides being velocity sensitive, the keyboard also has aftertouch. So on some of the sounds, in this case a brass and a piano layer, I have aftertouch, so I can swell a brass sound or add vibrato, things like that to external MIDI gear as well. So we have aftertouch on this keyboard. On the Promega 2, that is of course velocity sensitive but does not have aftertouch. Okay, to the right of the sound sections is the graphic EQ. On the Promega 3 there are 8 bands of EQ. On the Promega 2 there are 4 bands of EQ. The nice thing about the EQ is it's programmable along with your presets, which are selected right here in the preset section. You have some choices though. If we wanted EQ off altogether, I simply press the on-off button just like you do in sound sections, and now the EQ is off totally. If I want it on, I can turn it on. And when I create my own setups and store them as presets, any EQ adjustments I've made will be recalled when I select my preset. Or if you're in a situation where, say, the room is just real weird and you need a specific EQ curve just to make things sound good, you can dial it up and then press the lock button, and now the presets will not change your EQ. So it kind of overrides the preset or what's memorized for the EQ settings. And then there's also a reset button, so if you want to start completely flat, you press that. It zeroes out all of the bands, and then to change them, you simply spin, again, the rotary knobs, just like in the sound sections. We spin it to the right to increase or to the left to decrease the frequencies, so you can create the curve that you want. And visually, of course, you can see exactly what's going on, as well as here. So let's go back to piano, and we'll talk about the presets. There are 64 presets that are factory presets, so they're there for life. But then there's another 64 user presets. It's very simple to store a preset if you go through and you make adjustments, get things sounding the way you want, layered and whatnot, and you want to store it, you press the store button, and automatically you'll be in the user area at that point. You select a bank, A through H, the bottom row, and then you select a preset location, 1 through 8, from the top row, and it's stored. During the storing process, as soon as you press store, the display will flash to the left here with whatever name happens to have been there to start with, and you can use the keyboard to type in a new name, and then you store your preset, and it's done. Along with the preset buttons section, there is tuning. So if we want to tune to other instruments or whatever, we can use the up-down buttons and tune. If you want to reset to 440, you just press both buttons and you're back to 440. There's also master transpose. So if I needed to transpose into a different key, that is real handy right in front of you. To the right of the preset buttons, there's a local off. So if you're going to use it in a MIDI configuration or in a computer setup or whatever, and you very quickly want to turn local off, you just press it and local is off. So it's very simple. Below that is the touch button. When I press that, the display in the edit and controls starts blinking with the current setting for touch, or the velocity curve, in other words. Right now it's set to normal. The buttons right below that display, there's a left and a right button. If I press the left button, it says soft. To the right, normal, then hard, and then user. When you're in user mode, the display to the right shows the value that the user velocity curve is set at. It goes from 1 to 100, and it's very simple. If I maintain a straight velocity here on a key, and I'll just go through this value range. Okay, and these are all just different velocity curves, so you can go in and get it set exactly. If you're a very hard player, you might want it on 100. If you're like me, I typically have it around 80 or in that neighborhood. So you have quite a bit of dynamic range using that. So we'll put it back to normal for a second, and we'll press the touch button to turn it off. Now, there's also a demo button, I should point out. When you press the demo button, every section has a demo, so you just use the on-off buttons to select the demo that you want. And again, a lot of those demos are on the website, so you can go through and listen to them at your own convenience. So let's talk about the effects section. There's two effects processors, as I said, reverb and what we call pro effects. The reverb section has many choices of reverbs, from concert hall, recital room, garage, a tiled room, tight room. There's gated reverbs, there's canyon, stadium, plate reverbs. So there's a lot to choose from. And then there's also a couple matrix reverbs, just lots of reflections and huge reverb, basically. To the right of the dial are the parameter settings for the reverb section. And what we have here, there's depth. So when we press the depth button, the fader, I don't know if you can see that, but the fader actually moves to the position that that value is set at, and the display also reads out, in this case 98, and the range is 0 to 127. So if I press that down and we'll reselect the preset, boom, it jumps up to the preset value. So that's depth. Then if we go to the right is delay. This is pre-delay, okay, typical reverb parameter. Below that is time. This is the reverb time, or the decay time for that room. And then to the right of that is a button labeled send. And when you press send, what happens is all of the sound section level controls move to the assigned send level for each section. So if I wanted the piano, let's say that's on, to not have as much reverb, just pull this in down. If I want a whole lot of reverb, I send it up. Okay? And each sound section is instantaneously accessible as far as the send. Again, you don't have to go through menus or anything. It's just right there. So that's reverb. If we move down to the pro effects, same thing goes. Once you know one section, you know the other. It's very simple. We've got chorus, flanger, wah-wah, phase shifter, compressors, loudness, exciters, some delays, and then combinations like chorus with exciter, chorus with delay, with tremolo, with flanger, and so forth. And the controls are exactly the same. If we have a chorus, let's maybe go to a Rhodes sound like this. How about a brighter Rhodes so we can really hear the chorus effect for a second? Okay, that's actually an FM type piano, but it's bright, so we'll be able to hear this. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the Pro Effects button, which is now going through the chorus. Quite simple. Again, we press depth. The fader moves up to the assigned depth of that effect. I can pull it down or turn it up, depending on how much chorus I want. I can also go to the send level and determine how much of that sound section is actually going into the processor. So right now it's at 0. as I move it up to the top, we're getting full output into the input of the effects processor. Okay, and then parameter 1, on the reverb section you've got delay and time. Those are predetermined. In the effects, in the Pro Effects section though, there are 2 parameters that are adjustable, and those parameters differ depending on which effect you've selected. As an example, in chorus, parameter 1 is rate, so okay, you can hear the rate going up and down, or the speed of the chorus effect. Parameter 2 is the feedback, or it increases the chorus effect itself. Okay, and then you still have the send button, which again you can assign how much of each sound section is going into that effects processor. If we were on a delay, then the parameter 1 and parameter 2 would be the delay the time, how long it is between each delay, and parameter 2 is the amount of taps, or again the feedback. So if you want 1 echo or do you want multiple echoes. That is the effects section. Now let's talk about the edit and controls for a second. This is the only area where you actually have some menus to deal with. Below the LED, there are the right and left button, which allows you to scroll through various parameters. Below that, there are 4 buttons, one labeled Sounds, one labeled MIDI, Controllers, and Split Point. Okay, we'll talk about Split Point first because that's pretty obvious. When you press and hold split point, the LED reads out where the split is at that moment. While holding the button, you simply press a key anywhere on the keyboard, and that will assign a new split point. Something important, when you create your presets, that split point is memorized as well. Now let's talk about the Sounds button. When I press the Sounds button, there are 2 choices, and we select them with the left-right buttons right below the LED. Right now it's on Filter. Filter, it's a low-pass filter that can be assigned to any of the 4 sound sections. And it's quite simple. Let's start with a bright piano. And if I wanted brighter yet, I can increase that value up to 64. Or if I want it mellower, I can pull the value down to minus 64. So if I like this particular piano, this is a Fazioli 10-foot concert grand. If I like the character of this instrument, but it's a little too bright for the song I'm working on, I can mellow it out and okay, you still have plenty dynamic range, but it just mellows out from the attack portion, so that's kind of nice. Also, if you're trying to get to a very specific number or value, you can use the octave plus minus buttons to move the fader just one click at a time. So that's the filter. Now if I use the right arrow button, we have panning. Okay, that's pretty obvious. Here's the piano on the left, on the right, and anywhere in between. So if I wanted my acoustic piano on the left, and I wanted a let's say a kind of a straight Rhodes on the right, and I'll go back to the volume levels and okay, so that's panning. It's very simple. And again, as soon as you go to that parameter, you visually see where the level or the faders are, so you know exactly what's going on. All right, so that's the Sounds button. Now let's press the MIDI button. When I do that, the channel display appears in the Edit Control LED, and we can see that Section 1 is Channel 1, Section 2 is Channel 2, 3, and 4. Each section can transmit or receive on any of the 16 MIDI channels. It's quite simple. You grab the level fader, move it up or down through the choices. If you pull the fader all the way down, it turns that section off completely. So let's put it back to 1 on the first section there, and we'll use the right arrow button. The next parameter is program change. Each section can transmit its own program change out to MIDI. And to do that, you just dial in using the level control again to the appropriate program change that you want. To the right of that is bank, most significant byte and least significant byte. So you can set up the instrument to transmit bank change information so you can access sounds within any other modules that you have. And then to the right of that is common channel. Common channel allows the Promega to receive MIDI program changes to select presets. A preset, remember, can be layers or splits of various sounds. So if you're going to use a computer or whatever to control the Promega, you don't have to send individual changes to each of the sections. You can simply, on the common channel, send program change and it'll select a preset. So that's what common channel is. Then to the right of that is MIDI mode. Well, there's two choices. Now in this case we use the preset area to select the two modes. There's multiple mode and there's global mode. What this means is in multiple mode, any MIDI parameters that you set up, program changes, MIDI channels, whether a section's on or off, will be stored in a preset. When you select a new preset, all of those parameters can change. In global mode, the MIDI parameters that you set are locked in and they're not going to be changed by preset. So it just depends on your particular setup as to how you want the unit to function. Then to the right of that, which is the final option, is dump, MIDI dump. If you've created your presets and you want to store them off to a computer or whatever, to a sequencer, you select dump and then it says press store to start. So we would press the store button and the MIDI dump would start. That can go into any standard MIDI sequencer, computer or another keyboard or whatever. Okay, let's talk about the fourth and final button in the edit control section called controllers. We'll press that and the first option we see is damper. Now I want to talk about the back panel for just a second. On the back there are three pedal inputs. One is labeled damper, the other two are labeled pedal 1 and pedal 2 respectively. There's also MIDI in, out, and through, a serial port if you don't want to use MIDI and you're going to use a serial port interface. We already mentioned the audio inputs and outputs and so forth. But the pedal inputs are really fun because they read what type of pedal is plugged in when the instrument is turned on. Now the damper pedal input, that's damper all the time. Only thing you can do is decide if the damper is going to control one or more of the sound sections. So to turn a section off, you pull the fader down, turn it on, you push it up. So now damper is going to control piano. It's not going to control the bass if I'm split, things like that. Okay. The next option is pedal 1 and then pedal 2 beyond that. Now what's nice here is if there are no pedals plugged into pedal 1 or pedal 2, those options won't even appear. So again, in making the instrument easier to use, faster to use, less menu options to weed through, if you don't have pedals plugged in, you're not going to see those parameters appear. Why do you need to? You can't use them anyway. In this case, I have a volume pedal plugged in to pedal 1 input and another, just a momentary foot switch plugged into pedal 2 input. This is important because when pedal 1, as I said, is the volume pedal, the parameter list that I have are MIDI controller numbers, which have a range of 0 to 127. To move through those parameters, I use the level fader in the effects section, and in the LCD to the left of the preset buttons, I can visually see what parameter number, what controller number I'm selecting. And a lot of these we've assigned to specific functions in the Promega. There's volume, expression, brightness, wah-wah control for the Pro Effects section, things like that, reverb depth, and so forth. All right. If I had a momentary foot switch plugged into pedal 1, the only options we would see are going to be soft, sostenuto, program up or preset down, and then also section on off. So if I go to pedal 2 input, in fact I have a momentary switch, so the only options I have, sostenuto, soft, preset up, preset down, and section on off. So you can turn sections on and off with the pedals. So that's real nice. It makes it a little bit handier in programming. If we go beyond pedal 2, we have pitch. That's pitch bend. Is a section going to respond to pitch bend or not? On or off on each section. Then there's mod. That's the mod wheel. And again, each section can or doesn't have to respond to the modulation wheel. Beyond that is the output. There's two sets of outputs, a left and right stereo output, and then there's also the other two outputs that are independent. So if I wanted, well, let's say I wanted a bass split and I wanted my bass to go to a bass amp, well, I could move that from left, right, out, the stereo out, moved up to output 1 only, or output 2. Or if I still wanted, if I was using a stereo piano, but I wanted to bypass the effects processing and the EQ in the instrument and have a nice dry signal, I could use output 1 and 2, so I'd still get my stereo grand, but it's coming out of the other two outputs completely dry. So that's quite handy on each section as well. Beyond that is tuning. All right, there are 7 different scales that you can select in the Promega. The first one is equal temperament tuning. These are selected by the preset buttons on above. Okay, so number 1 is equal tuning. Number 2 is piano 1, piano 2. These are stretch tunings, and then beyond that is mean tone, Kernberger, Tartini, Volati, and then the 7th is a user scale. Every key can be tuned to whatever pitch you want. If I play a key, that reads out in the display. So let's just press middle C, and in the display it says user C4 equals 0. The level control in the effects section is where I do the tuning. So let's just take that and put it minus 64 and go to E and put it to plus 63. As I go through the notes, you'll see the level fader moving in response to the pitch I've selected. So you can go up and down every key on the instrument and tune it to your liking. The next mode is performance mode. And what this is, there's 2 choices, mode 1, mode 2. This simply means in performance mode 1, when you select a bank A through H, it will wait for you to select the preset above before everything changes. In mode 2, when you press a bank button, it automatically goes to whatever preset was selected. So it can be a little bit faster in performance, so you don't have to do 2 button presses if in fact you're moving to a different bank to select another preset. So that's the performance modes. And then to the right of that is pedal modes. Just like in the MIDI section where you have global and multiple, this determines if the pedals are going to be globally set so the presets won't reassign the pedals, or whether in multiple mode a preset will remember all of the pedal assignments and change them accordingly. So I'll leave it in multiple mode in this case. And then the final parameter under controllers is startup mode. There's default and then there's user. Well, do you want the instrument to start up in default mode, which is preset, the factory preset mode, or if we go to user, when you turn the instrument on, it will start up in user preset mode. And that's it. Very simple. And believe it or not, those are all of the menu-driven parameters. There's not too many of them. It's not too hard. That is the edit and control section. Now let's actually talk about using some of these controls that I've talked about. I'm going to go to the user group and select A1. Here I've programmed a piano sound and string sounds, actually 2, one from the orchestra pad section and one from the bass other. If I want to hear them independently, I can just simply turn off the sections I don't want to hear, and I've got orchestra pad on, and you'll hear that this is a warm pad. Turn that section off, turn on section 4, and this string sound is a little brighter. Okay, and of course my piano section. If I want the other sections on, I simply press the on buttons and there they are. I mentioned that I have a volume pedal plugged into pedal 1. I've assigned that volume pedal in this preset to expression. Now, you've got volume and you have expression. Expression, the nice thing about that is the volume levels that I've set in those 2 sections, the orchestra for the warm pad and the string sound in the bass other group, the orchestra pad is set to a level of 126 and the bass other group, or the string sound, is set to 84. When I floor the volume pedal with expression, this 84 level is as high as that string sound's going to get. It's not going to go from 0 to 127 full volume. It will only go as high as I've predetermined with the level fader. If I set the pedal to volume, then I'd have full range. It's kind of nice because I've blended 2 sounds, the warm pad, which I wanted quite a bit louder than that brighter string sound, so I've created my mix, and then the expression pedal in this case equally moves the volumes up and down. So, okay, on preset A2 in the user group, I've taken a clavinet sound. I've used the filter to mellow it down a little bit. Actually gives it more of a muted sound. And then the pedal is assigned to wah-wah, and I have the Pro effects set to wah, and my effects, the reverb effect set to matrix at a very low depth. Okay, so the volume pedal is working as a wah-wah pedal now. Preset A3 is kind of fun. I've got the piano group and the vintage keys group turned on, and the to left button is set on the vintage keys section, which gives me a Rhodes on my left and an acoustic piano on my right. And then the pedals, I've got the foot switch assigned to section on off, which is going to bring in the orchestra section and the bass section. And the bass side, I've got a bass and ride cymbal sound, and also the to left button, so that will be a split layered on top of the Rhodes. And then in the orchestra section, I have a brass sound, and that will kick on with the foot switch. Also, the volume pedal is acting as an expression pedal for the brass side. So we can have quite a bit going on as we're playing. So I'll start playing with just the first two sections, and then I'll kick in the pedal and use the volume to bring in the brass. Here we go. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of control, a lot of sound you can get out of the instrument. Okay, let's say we create our own setup here. Let's start with an acoustic piano sound, so I'm just going to go to the factory preset A1. Okay, and let's maybe layer a Rhodes, maybe a bright Rhodes. So turn off the piano for a second, turn on the vintage keys, and we'll dial up Rhodes 4 here. Okay, that's pretty good. We probably could use some chorus, so we'll press the Pro effects. The effects is already set on chorus, so there's chorus. Let's turn on the acoustic piano. Okay, that's pretty good, but the acoustic's a little loud, so we'll just go to that volume, turn it down a bit. That's good. How about we pan those? So we'll move to panning, and we'll just pan them, not real hard left and right, but just a little bit both directions. That's good, so we can define the sound a little bit better. And how about turning on a some kind of a string sound? So let's just try that. We'll turn off those sections, turn on section 3 for a second, and look for a sound that we might like. Ooh. Well, actually, that'd be kind of nice. That's called space pad. So let's try that one. We'll turn on our other sections. Okay, it's got a little bit too much reverb in it though, so I'll simply go to the send and go to that section and turn the send level down. So now we're not getting that volume of the pre-delay echoing on that sound, so that's cool. So we're set with that, and then maybe on section 4, let's turn that one on for a second, and we don't want a bass. How about strings? Okay, I like that, but you know, it'd be nice if the strings was an octave higher, so we'll press the octave button. Now the strings are up. They're a little bright, so we'll go to the filter and mellow them down a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, that's pretty good. How about if we assign the volume pedal to that string sound? So we'll go to controllers, move over to pedal 1, which is where my volume pedal is. I want it on that section and off on the other 3, and we'll dial into expression just like that. And now I'm moving the volume pedal, and you can hear the volume coming in and out. It could actually be louder, so that's good. Okay, so let's turn on section 4 on the pedal as well. There we go. So now let's see what we have. We'll pull the pedal down. that space pad sound I thought I liked, but I think it'd be nicer with a choir, so let's just dial that in. We'll turn the pianos down and the strings down just a bit, so we'll hear the choir a little bit more. And instead of strings, how about a church organ? We'll crank that up just a bit. And that's a church organ, which means it needs a lot of reverb. So we'll go to send on the reverb section. It's at 50. We'll just crank it up quite a bit. Now we've got some reverb. Maybe instead of that Rhodes, since we're getting kind of classical here, we'll dial up a harpsichord in vintage keys. Don't need the chorus anymore, so we'll turn that off on that section. Everyone that sees the Promega typically has a, wow, doesn't that look different, initial reaction, and it sure does, but hopefully you're seeing the idea of these controls, the way they're laid out, and how fast everything is to get to. If you have an idea, it's right there in front of you. Just go and make a dial change, move the fader, and you've changed it in a major way. If you come up with something you like, you press store, you pick a location, and it's now stored in there. So that is the Promega series instruments. Thank you very much.